Well, hello there, and welcome to day 61 of A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. Today, talking about the thriller, drama, character study that is The Place Beyond the Pines. This is going to be quite a hard one for me to talk about because, okay, I'm in two minds about this, and so I'm actually going to try to split this review up. Because just up top, I genuinely think this is a very interesting film, a really interesting thriller and drama, and well worth seeing. I have thoughts and criticisms of it, but broadly speaking, I do think it's a really quite something to behold. And its ambition is all there on the screen. But this is an incredibly twisty, quite easily spoiled film, and so I'm going to find it quite difficult to talk about without just outright spoiling some major plot details that I do think are worth experiencing unperturbed. So, I'm going to split this review up into three, I suppose, like the film does. There are three acts of this film, and there are three stages of the review. Stage one, the disclaimer. Now we're into stage two, which is the spoiler-free discussion of it. So, Derek Cianfrance is a very, I can tell, is a very ambitious director and writer. He's one of those directors who doesn't do a lot of films, but when he does, he is trying to say something. There's something very distinctive in his use of colour and light and sound, where you know you're watching a Derek Cianfrance film. Or Cianfrance, I'm not quite sure how it's pronounced, but each film that he makes is distinctive from the others, but there is a certain, I suppose, distinctive style that he has, an auteurishness to him. And you can definitely tell that with a place beyond the pines, because it has this real. If you look at the opening section of the film, there is something really disorientating about it. The film opens with Ryan Gosling, who then is immediately met by his ex-lover, played by Eva Mendes. And he very quickly discovers that because of their love affair, he's now a father, even though he hasn't seen her for more than a year. But to sort of step away from the plot of it, the way that his character is presented is very much this roadie, drifter. He travels with a carnival, and there's something almost detached and disassociated from life with him. And so it's almost like a haze, where the opening of the film is full of this colour and blurriness, and the thing which frankly I really don't like about carnivals, which is it's just noise and light, and it's really hard to get your bearings. And though we move away from the carnival fairly quickly, that haze remains with the character. And so, as he settles in this town, you still get this real sense of blur, and it really sort of melds into the landscape. This film is distinctly about landscape and identity through place. I mean, the title obviously refers to the pines that are surrounding this town, and when he's driving on his motorcycle, you just get lost in this sea of trees, and you're trying to sort of break through for something else, but there isn't anything but trees. To the point where I tried not to know too much about this film going in, but I was aware that it's. I was starting to think, oh, is this a horror? I was aware that it was a thriller of some kind, but I thought, oh, well, is this much more like a Hills Have Eyes kind of film? And yet, it isn't. It is a much more human story and a characterful story, but there is this real disorientation. And so you follow Ryan Gosling, who, to his credit, and Ryan Gosling is an actor who you know, many people through his sort of filmography have criticised the fact that he's quite a sort of plain actor. There's something very the appeal that he brings in is about that he's sort of this handsome man, but at the same time he is a little plain. He is a little everyman. There's nothing distinctive about him, and so you watch stuff like La La Land, which frankly I do not like. La La Land is not a film for me. And there's something just very ordinary about him. To his credit, with The Place Beyond the Pines, he really does break out. There is something. He uses the sense of the aloofness that he can sometimes be associated with to make his character, as I say, almost like someone who's living through a haze, who's trying desperately to sort of push through this blur of life. Because, and this is really the heart of the film. The film is about fatherhood. And so you follow Ryan Gosling as he, now having learned that he's a father, desperately trying to build a relationship with Eva Mendes, even though she's in a relationship with Mahershala Ali, and but also wants to build a relationship with their son. You know, he wants to be a father, and ultimately there is something tragic and a downfall in that, because this is still a thriller, and this film is very heavy and dark, and is very much about the failings of people outside of their control. As I say, initially as I'm watching the film, I'm thinking, is there going to be more of a horror inflection to it? But by that same token, that I also thought, well, actually, there's something almost fairy tale about it, like a dark fairy tale, very much in the same way as I discussed when I was talking about Freeway. There is this almost like you feel like you're watching a modern adaptation of a fairy tale that that doesn't exist, or you're just I'm not aware of. And in other ways, there's something quite Greek tragedy about it. You know, there is something epic and lengthy. It's a 2.5 hour film, or near it, close to that. And there is something quite Greek epic about it, but more in the sense of a Greek tragedy, like a Sophocles tragedy, because but it's a tragedy that almost hits generations of people and affects not just one person, but has a knock-on effect to the next, to the next, to the next, like a virus. There's something. I got a very similar feeling from the movie Blue Ruin, which I initially thought was directed also by Derek Cianfrance, but actually turns out it's the wrong Blue film. It was Blue Valentine that he directed. But Blue Ruin really has this similar sense of tragedy contained within the thriller. Because what Blue Ruin was trying to do was tell the story of how, if someone goes on a quest of revenge, there isn't this sort of nobility to it, and there isn't this sense of great plotting. It is brutal and horrible, and it will not end well. And there is parallels between this and that film in the sense that the characters are going on a journey that they don't have control over, but they are compelled to. And weirdly, if they dropped their nobility, if they tried to be less good, then in fact they would avoid the hurdles and the fate that awaits them. And you could say that for Ryan Gosling's character, you can say that for Bradley Cooper's character, you can say that about Dane DeHaan's character, that as you go through this film, there is just this real sense of impending tragedy to it. This is also a who's who film. This is one of those kind of films that, were it in the 90s, I could see a trailer of characters in shots where they're turning around or reacting in some way as their name comes up on the screen. You know, this is like this film stars Ryan Gosling, Bradley Cooper, Eva Mendes, Rose Byrne, Dane DeHaan, Mahershala Ali. The list goes on and on and on. Honestly, it is one of those films that, unbeknownst to being a film from 2012, I don't think it fully realised that it would be the presentation of actors who are great at who are the greats of the time, and actors who will become greats. But I genuinely think this is a really interesting film, and I think there's a lot going on here, and there's a lot of ambition. My criticism of it is its length. I do think it's just that little bit too long, and because it wants to go for this great epic story, by the time it gets to the climax, I was a bit burnt out, and it required me to connect to people very quickly in a way that I just was. I was there, but it stretched me a lot to still be invested in the film by the climax. But I do genuinely think this is good, and I would highly recommend this as one of those thrillers that isn't forgotten, but I think, didn't get plaudits at the time, whereas I think it is trying to do something interesting and ambitious. So, from this point, I'm going to end the spoiler-free section and jump into the spoiler section of the review. So, the biggest twist of this film is that within 45 minutes, Ryan Gosling dies. And it's not that it comes out of nowhere. You really do get the sense of impending tragedy to it. He in his attempt to try to support his family and try to build a family with Eva Mendes and their son, he becomes a bank robber, and immediately you're like, oh, I can see this not going well for him. And unfortunately, it's one of those films where you can see the tragedy coming, but you don't quite know from what direction it will hit. And you think, oh, he'll get caught doing a bank heist, or he'll be killed during a bank heist. And it is that to some degree, but there's a lot going on that leads to that. And as I say, you don't expect it at the 45-minute mark, where Ryan Gosling, who has made some real mistakes, and they're character-driven mistakes, where he's just made some bad choices, partly because he doesn't quite know how to express himself, and it's supposed to be a commentary on the fact that this guy is undereducated and is trying his best, but doesn't really know how to be his best self. And so, as everything starts to implode, he then escalates these bank robberies that he's doing again and again and again. And because, as a consequence of that, he's caught up with a young rookie police officer played by Bradley Cooper, who chases him down. And he knows he's going to die, so he calls Eva Mendes and basically says, "Don't promise me you won't tell our son about me." And then Bradley Cooper shoots him and kills him. And then the film becomes completely different film practically, because now you're following Bradley Cooper and the second act of the film, to the point where, as I mentioned in the spoiler free section, when you're following Ryan Gosling, there's this haze and blur to it, whereas the cinematography almost changes when you're following Bradley Cooper. So he's a young cop who's well educated. He's got he went to law school. He's passed the bar, but he's decided to become a police officer, and then this happens to him. And as a consequence, he kills a man who didn't pull a gun on him first, but as a consequence did shoot him in the leg. And so he's recovering from that, and he's also trying to rebuild his status, and then corrupt cops surround him because they are very aware of the opportunity that he could present them in his bad state. And now the film is this police drama, and it's about this guy who's trying to be a good cop surrounded by corruption on every level. And for a while, you're almost in a different film. Eva Mendes, for instance, is still in the film, but now she's not just a supporting character, she's like a secondary supporting character. And this is the point where Rose Byrne, who plays his wife, comes in, and it's very much about the fracturing of their relationship. And as I say, it's just a wildly different film. It is for a good section of it. I won't go into too many details because I feel like you could still get a lot out of this even if you hadn't seen it and you've gotten this far into the discussion of the film. But I will, again, here's the second big twist, which is, so Bradley Cooper deals with the corrupt cops in a way that really benefits him, and as a consequence he ends up as assistant district attorney. And then they jump 15 years. And in the last 40 minutes of the film, you're now following Dane DeHaan, who plays Ryan Gosling's son, Ryan Gosling and Eva Mendes' son. And then you're also following Bradley Cooper's son. And it's one of those criticisms of the system, or sort of holding a mirror up, where actually Dane DeHaan's character is in fact this very sweet-natured, slightly withdrawn boy